A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. I'm glad you're with us on the program today. Obviously, we're going to be talking about what happened in Boulder, Colorado, Monday afternoon. 10 people shot and killed at a King Super grocery store. A suspect is in custody. His name has been released by authorities, but I will not be using his name today. I can tell you that he is a 21-year-old individual who lived in Arvada, or lives in Arvada, Colorado, which is a Denver suburb located south of the city of Boulder. We don't have a lot of information about the suspect at this time. The police chief said during a press conference on Tuesday morning that she was not aware of any prior contacts with law enforcement on the part of this 21-year-old suspect. Pete Williams of NBC News reporting that the family of the suspect has described him as mentally troubled, in essence. According to Pete Williams, again speaking on MSNBC, so the suspect's family members revealed that he, quote, suffered from fairly severe mental problems, paranoia, thought people were always chasing him. And Williams as well reporting that there were no known records of encounters between the suspect and law enforcement, either in Boulder or Arvada. Now, the names of the 10 victims have also been released by the media, and I want to share those with you. 20-year-old Denny Strong, 23-year-old Nevin Stanasic, 25-year-old Ricky Olds, 49-year-old Trelona Bartkowiak, 59-year-old Suzanne Fountain, 51-year-old Terry Leiker, 61-year-old Kevin Mahoney, 62-year-old Lynn Murray, 65-year-old Jody Waters, and 51-year-old Boulder police officer Eric Talley, who joined the force in 2010. Those are the victims in the shooting on Monday. Obviously, the gun control community has already responded. In fact, before the names of the victims were even known, we had our first calls for gun control. The anti-gun media is launching a full court press to pass a gun ban. We have heard, although it has not officially been confirmed, that the suspect in this case was using what the Boulder police chief referred to as a patrol rifle. And many media outlets have seized on the fact that back in 2018, the city of Boulder passed a local gun ban ordinance. So those who possessed a modern sporting rifle and lived in the city of Boulder were required to get rid of those guns or register those guns with the city's police department. Very, very similar on a local level to the gun ban plan advanced by then candidate Joe Biden. Now, a couple of weeks ago, that ban was struck down in Boulder by a Colorado state judge who determined that Boulder's gun ban violated state firearms preemption law. In other words, the state legislature in Colorado has said, look, we're going to have a uniform set of gun laws across the state. We're going to be the body to set those gun control laws. Municipalities like Boulder cannot pass their own more restrictive gun control measures that go beyond state law. City of Boulder had not yet announced whether or not it was going to appeal that decision at the time of the shooting, but of course now there are many calls for a statewide gun ban. The independent paper WestWord in Denver, with a headline, How the NRA Helped Make King Super's Shooter's Assault Rifle Legal, noting that the National Rifle Association had supported that lawsuit. There are actually two different lawsuits filed against the city of Boulder after its gun ban. The one that the judge actually ruled on 10 days ago was a legal argument that rested again on Boulder's gun ban being a violation of the state's firearm preemption law. So it was not actually a Second Amendment challenge to the city of Boulder's gun ban. There was a separate lawsuit filed in federal court challenging the gun ban on Second Amendment grounds, but the federal court had basically held off in its decision to say, well, we want to see what the state Supreme Court does here with the other lawsuit. So we had not had a resolution in the federal lawsuit. But I want to quote, if I can, just a little bit from this WestWord piece. They say authorities have not revealed when the King Soopers shooter obtained his patrol rifle, whether it was during the period when Boulder's ban was in effect or if he bought it during the 10 days after the ban was lifted. But there is no question that when he was using that firearm to take so many lives, such a weapon was legal to possess in Boulder. Well, again, according to authorities, this suspect didn't live in Boulder. And so the gun ban, which again required either a residents of Boulder to get rid of their guns or register them with the local police department, would not have applied to that suspect if he was living in Arvada. Now, the Boulder gun ban may have also prevented, on paper anyway, or forbidden, let's say forbidden, not prevented, could have forbidden semi-automatic rifles being brought inside the city limits. But again, are we supposed to really believe that somebody with murderous intent would have decided, well, I can't bring my gun into Boulder. It's against the law. So I'm not going to go take innocent human lives, which, by the way, also against the law. That defies credulity to think that a gun ban on paper would have prevented this individual from acting out and taking 10 innocent human lives, which is what happened on Monday afternoon. So again, the attacks by gun control advocates on our right to keep our arms using this horrific event as their excuse have already begun and are likely only going to get worse. We have a couple of pieces up at Bearing Arms right now about the Democrats on Capitol Hill who are pushing Joe Biden to act at the federal level, to at least introduce his gun ban bill, which has yet to be introduced in Congress. We have a gun ban that's been introduced by Senator Dianne Feinstein, but it is not the ban that Joe Biden talked about on the campaign trail. Under Joe Biden's proposed gun ban, the millions of Americans who own the more than 20 million modern sporting rifles in civilian hands would be told you either have to hand them over to the government in exchange for some cash stipend, or you would have to register those firearms under the National Firearms Act, let the federal government know that you have these guns, and once you let the federal government know that you have these guns, we promise that we'll let you keep them forevermore. That gun ban proposal by Joe Biden does not have accompanying legislation in Congress right now. That could change in the very near future. CNN also reporting today that gun control activists pressing Biden to go ahead and issue executive actions on firearms, which Biden, again, had pledged to do as a candidate, but we've not yet seen this in the first couple of months of his presidency. What are areas where Biden could act via executive action? Well, one of the things that folks have been talking about is a requirement that supposedly they say Biden could do via executive order. I'm not sure about this, but that would require background checks be conducted on the sales of unfinished frames and receivers, the 80% lowers, 80% frames. Gun control activists call them ghost guns. Because they are not firearms, as defined under federal law, a background check is not required to purchase one. Because they're not completed firearms. So you can buy one, you can complete it and assemble a firearm yourself as allowed under federal law. Gun control activists want to change that. But gun control activists have also asked, and Joe Biden actually said that he would do this as a candidate, that he would ban the importation of so-called assault weapons. And this is something that Joe Biden has not done in his first couple of months in office. But there is precedent for this. Back in 1989, then President George H.W. Bush imposed a ban on the importation of dozens of models of semi-automatic rifles by name, making that ban permanent in July of 1989. So there is precedent for Biden to act in banning the importation of modern sporting rifles. Now, this would likely have the opposite effect of what gun control activists are intending. It would not dramatically curtail the availability of these firearms, but it would, I believe, dramatically increase the demand for these firearms as the Biden administration tries to move against the most commonly sold centerfire rifle in America. Now, is that going to be enough to prevent Joe Biden from enacting such an executive order? I doubt it. I think there is a lot of pressure on Biden to do, quote unquote, something. And executive actions would appear to be the easiest thing for him to do. But obviously, we are still paying very close attention to what's going on Capitol Hill. You know, we had the passage of H.R. 8, H.R. 1446 out of the House a couple of weeks ago. A Senate Judiciary Subcommittee holding hearings today, chaired by Richard Blumenthal, on the issue of gun control that was already scheduled to take place. They're not going to be marking up or voting on those gun control bills, but Senator Blumenthal and other gun control activists in the Senate most definitely using that committee hearing as an opportunity to call for more restrictions, including bans on modern sporting rifles. So we are obviously following what's going on in Washington, D.C. very closely, but our hearts and our minds are centered on Boulder today and those families who are grieving, the lives that were lost, cut short by the act of a murderous killer. And in the days ahead, we're going to learn more about this suspect, his potential motivations. We are going to hear a lot of talk about why we need to enact sweeping gun control laws. We're not going to hear a lot of talk about the gun control laws that are already on the books in Colorado, as a matter of fact. In fact, I don't think we'll hear much talk about that at all, but it is worth noting that back in 2013, after the Aurora Theater shooting in Aurora, Colorado, lawmakers passed a magazine ban that limited magazine capacity to 20 rounds in the state of Colorado. They passed a universal background check bill requiring all private transfers of firearms to go through a background check. And in the years since, they have continued to pass new gun restrictions on legal gun owners, including most recently an extreme risk protection order law, a red flag firearm seizure law that in Colorado allows for law enforcement and family members to petition the courts to have firearms temporarily seized from individuals who a court would deem to be a danger to themselves or others. Now, again, we're very, very early on in the law enforcement investigation, but there is no indication that a red flag law was ever invoked against this suspect, despite Pete Williams, again, of NBC News, saying that family members described the suspect as somebody with severe mental issues, including paranoia and the belief that others were out to get him. We don't know about this individual's mental health history. Again, according to law enforcement, no known contacts. So from a criminal perspective, this individual might not have been prohibited by law from purchasing a firearm. But if he was ever adjudicated as a mental defective, if he was ever involuntarily committed to a psychiatric facility, then he would have been forbidden by law from possessing a firearm. One other interesting thing to note about the gun control laws that have been on the books in Colorado for nearly a decade now. This is a headline from earlier this year. Colorado's violent and property crimes spiked in 2020. Now, look, that's not unusual. 2020 saw a crime spike in a lot of cities around the country. But here's a story from 2019. For the fifth straight year, Colorado has seen an increase in violent crime, according to a report from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation released Wednesday. A 7.95% increase in the category of violent crime in 2018 compared to 2017, with more than half of last year's violent crime reports falling into the category of aggravated assault, according to the report. Every year since those gun control laws were put on the books in Colorado back in 2013, the state's violent crime rate has actually gone up. It hasn't gone down. Then Governor John Hickenlooper, when he signed the magazine ban, when he signed the background check bill into law in 2013, swore that they would make the state a safer place, that violent crime was going to go down. The opposite actually happened. Violent crime increased dramatically across the state. In fact, in the first 5 years after those gun control laws were put into effect, violent crime increased by more than 25% across the state of Colorado, at a time in which violent crime was declining throughout much of the country. Now, I realize that these facts are inconvenient to gun control advocates, which is one reason why they're not going to talk about the existing laws that are already on the books in Colorado. But as we, again, talk about the supposed need for more gun control legislation, the efficacy of these gun control proposals, we need to talk about what actually happens when gun control advocates get their way, as was the case in Colorado in 2013 and in the years since. We're obviously going to continue to follow the situation in Boulder very, very closely, as well as the developments on Capitol Hill. But that is what we know as of right now. And we will have more for you on the upcoming edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. I do want to turn our attention to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, our recidivist report. In fact, let's start there. Headline from the Current Argus in Carlsbad, New Mexico. Probation given to man who shot at 2 women. Yes, he actually shot at them and received nothing more than probation as a result. The Current Argus reports 32-year-old Stuart Dollar pleaded guilty to aggravated assault with a deadly weapon against a household member, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, interference with communications, DWI, negligent use of a deadly weapon, no proof of insurance, evidence of registration, and driving while his license was suspended. And received probation as a result. It was June 4th of last year. Dollar was allegedly intoxicated when he pulled up at a home in Carlsbad, demanded money owed to him by a woman at the residence. He did not get the cash that he was seeking. He left. He came back a short time later, and after a verbal argument, pointed the gun at 2 women and fired a shot, missing both of them. According to the criminal complaint, he then grabbed a phone from one of the women as she was calling police. He tossed it. He was later arrested by police after he allegedly gave officers a false name. But a judge suspended prison sentences for Mr. Dollar back on March the 1st, and Stuart Dollar was given credit for time served on his probation sentence as well. Why? We don't know. We don't know. All we know is that somebody who fired a shot at 2 women in New Mexico not going to do any time behind bars as a result of his crime. Today's armed citizen story from Denver, Colorado, where over the weekend a homeowner shot and killed an intruder. This was on Saturday, according to the Denver Post. Happened Saturday night about 9:15 in the evening in the 2200 block of Lafayette Street. Denver police spokesman Tyrone Campbell could not say on Sunday why the man was considered an intruder or whether or not he was outside the home when he was shot. Said he couldn't provide any additional details on the circumstances of the shooting. The Denver District Attorney's Office say that they'll determine whether or not criminal charges are warranted. But again, if this individual was an intruder there in that home, it sure sounds like this was a case of self-defense. We'll give you more details as they become available as well. And finally today, our good deed of the day from Mount Airy, North Carolina. That was the town that was supposed to be the inspiration for the Andy Griffith Show. So I always have this like small town American vibe when I think about Mount Airy, North Carolina. And this is definitely a small town paper story. Local high school student saves a life. Delia Chavez, who is a JROTC commander, known as an outstanding artist, a dedicated student, and a leader of the JROTC Color Guard, recently recognized as a lifesaver for her actions back on October 9th of last year when she saved her nephew's life. Mount Airy News reports she was babysitting her 18-month-old nephew, Noah Cortez, when he woke up from a nap, choking. It was obvious to Delia that Noah was struggling to breathe. She called 911. She explained what was going on to the dispatcher there. As she's on the phone with the dispatcher, Noah actually stopped breathing entirely. And the dispatcher told Delia to begin CPR. She had received CPR training as a freshman in high school, and she began to administer CPR to her nephew, forcing Noah to vomit. When he began to cry, she knew that his airway was no longer obstructed. Shortly after he began to breathe, a paramedic showed up along with EMTs, and an ambulance arrived at the home. The medical team, praising Delia's efforts, told her that her quick actions saved her nephew's life. They ended up taking Noah to the hospital as a precaution, but he is fine. And recently, Dale Harold and Justin Jarrell of the Surrey County Emergency Services presented Delia with the Surrey County Citizen Lifesaver Certificate. The Air Force, recognizing Delia's heroism as well, presenting her with an Air Force JROTC Silver Valor Award for a selfless act of heroism. One of her JROTC instructors, Master Sergeant Greg McCormick, says that the Silver Valor Award is the second highest ribbon that an Air Force JROTC cadet can earn, one that is rarely awarded. He says it has been an honor to see Delia grow into a great leader and a hero. So in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing, Delia Chavez, here in Mount Airy, North Carolina, we thank you for your very good deed. That is all the time we've got for you on this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. I do want to encourage you, though, to check out bearingarms.com throughout the day. We will have more updates out of Boulder, Colorado, as well as Washington, D.C., the reaction to the shooting from politicians who, again, are already seeking to turn this tragedy into political gain and advancing the anti-gun agenda in Congress. So, again, make sure that you are following along at bearingarms.com. Also, don't forget, you can subscribe to Town Hall Media on YouTube. That way you'll never miss one of these programs. Or if you watch on Rumble, just subscribe to Bearing Arms Cam & Company. If you like the podcast version, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and the townhall.com podcast page, you can find us there as well. We'll be back tomorrow with the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation. Thanks for being a part of the program today. Keep the community of Boulder in your thoughts and your prayers. And until we talk again, be well, be safe, and be free.